The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as people settled into their seats, their eyes shifting between the judge, the attorneys, and the man sitting in the witness stand, Officer Daniel Graves. The fluorescent lights overhead cast a stark glow on his uniform, but he didn't look as confident as a seasoned officer should. Across from him sat Karoline Leavitt, composed but unwavering, her gaze steady. It was a high-profile case, though not everyone in the room understood its full implications just yet. The prosecution had built its argument, meticulously presenting evidence that Graves had falsified his testimony about an incident involving Karoline months ago. At that time, she had been a well-known political figure in some circles, but Graves had seen her as just another citizen, someone without the power to challenge his authority. He had claimed she had resisted, that she had interfered with police work, that she had acted aggressively, but Karoline knew the truth, and so did her legal team. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. A gavel struck wood in the beginning of what would become a defining moment in the courtroom. The prosecutor stood, walking toward the center of the room, pausing for effect before addressing the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, today we will present undeniable proof that Officer Graves provided false testimony against Miss Leavitt. His words were not just incorrect, they were deliberate fabrications designed to incriminate an innocent person. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Graves shifted in his seat, his fingers tapping restlessly against the wooden stand. He had testified in court many times before, but this time was different. He was not here as the enforcer of the law, but as the accused. Karoline remained calm, but inside she understood the gravity of this moment. She had spent years navigating the political landscape, and she had faced opposition before. But this was personal. This was about more than just her. It was about every individual who had ever been falsely accused, every voice that had been silenced by officer figures who abused their power. The prosecution wasted no time. A screen flickered to life, displaying dashcam footage from the night of the incident. The room collectively leaned forward. The grainy video showed Karoline's vehicle pulling over, smoothly, her hands on the wheel as she waited for Officer Graves. When Graves approached, she responded politely, her voice calm. The footage captured every word exchanged between them. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" "License and registration." Her movements were slow, deliberate. The video continued, showing her exit the vehicle without protest, standing still as Graves walked around her car. But then came the most damning part, the moment where Graves accused her of obstruction. Her voice in the recording was steady, confused, not aggressive in the slightest. "Officer, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Are you resisting?" The room shifted with uneasy murmurs. The video clearly showed that she was not resisting, nor had she made any threats. The contrast between the footage and the written police report was undeniable. The prosecutor let the video finish before turning back to Graves. "Officer Graves, would you care to explain why your report states that Miss Leavitt resisted and acted aggressively when the footage shows the exact opposite?" Graves' jaw tightened. He shifted in his seat, his confidence unraveling before the jury's eyes. His silence spoke louder than any defense he could muster. Karoline remained calm, but inside she understood the gravity of this moment. The truth was no longer just her word against his. The evidence had spoken for itself. The silence in the courtroom was suffocating. Officer Daniel Graves sat rigidly in the witness stand, his fingers gripping the edge of the wooden surface in front of him. His face, once composed and authoritative, now looked pale under the unforgiving lights. Across from him, Karoline Leavitt remained poised, her expression unreadable. But she knew what was coming. The prosecutor paced slowly in front of the jury, his hands clasped behind his back. "Officer Graves, would you say that honesty is the foundation of law enforcement?" Graves hesitated before responding. "Yes, of course." The prosecutor stopped pacing and turned to face him directly. "And would you agree that an officer of the law, under oath, should always provide truthful testimony?" Graves swallowed hard. "Yes." The prosecutor nodded as if satisfied with the answer. Then he walked over to the defense table, picking up a folder filled with official documents. He lifted one sheet and held it up for the court to see. "Officer Graves, do you recognize this report?" Graves shifted in his seat. "That's my police report from the night in question. And you stand by the statements you made in this report, that Karoline Leavitt was aggressive, non-compliant, and obstructing justice?" Graves nodded. "I do." The prosecutor exhaled slowly, then turned toward the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed any further, I believe there's something critical this court needs to understand." He let the silence stretch for dramatic effect, before finally dropping the revelation that would shake the entire courtroom. "My client, Karoline Leavitt, is not just another citizen falsely accused of a crime. She is the current spokesperson for the White House." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks. Cameras' shutters clicked, and even the judge raised his eyebrow at the unexpected statement. Graves, however, looked completely blindsided. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The reality of what he had done was just beginning to sink in. The prosecutor walked closer to the stand. "Tell me, Officer Graves, were you aware of this?" Graves blinked, his lips pressing together in a tight line. "No, He cut himself off, struggling for words. His eyes darted toward Karoline, as if seeing her for the first time. The prosecutor didn't let up. "So, just to be clear, you falsely accused, arrested, and then lied on oath about a woman who now holds one of the most publicly scrutinized positions in the country?" Graves had no answer. The weight of his actions was now magnified tenfold. The jury members exchanged glances, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Karoline remained still, her eyes locked on Graves. This case was no longer just about her. It was about every person who had ever been falsely accused, every voice that had been silenced. And now the truth was out there. There was no undoing it. The weight of the revelation hung in the courtroom like a thick fog, suffocating and inescapable. Officer Daniel Graves sat frozen in the witness stand, his face drained of all color. His mind raced, trying to grasp the full extent of the disaster unfolding before him. He had lied on oath, confident that his word as a police officer would hold more weight than the testimony of what he called an ordinary citizen. But now he realized the truth. Karoline Leavitt was far from ordinary. The prosecutor let the moment linger, allowing the jury and the spectators to absorb what had just been revealed. The murmurs in the gallery grew louder, reporters whispering urgently into their phones, typing furiously on their laptops. The judge tapped his gavel twice, calling for order, but even he couldn't hide the look of disbelief in his eyes. Graves shifted uncomfortably. He had spent years in law enforcement, testifying in dozens of cases where his word had been taken as absolute truth. But now, for the first time, he was the one being scrutinized. His past cases would be reviewed, his credibility questioned, his future in law enforcement all but obliterated. The prosecutor turned back to him. "Officer Graves, now that we've established the truth, let me ask you this. How many other times have you falsified reports?" Graves' mouth opened, then closed again. He knew he couldn't answer that question without digging himself into an even deeper hole. Instead, he stared at the table in front of him, his hands clenched into fists. The judge sighed and turned toward the defense table. "Miss Leavitt, do you have anything you'd like to say before we proceed?" Karoline slowly stood, her posture straight, her expression calm yet commanding. The cameras in the back of the courtroom zoomed in on her as she took a deep breath before speaking. "Your Honor, what happened to me is not just about me. It's about accountability. It's about ensuring that no officer, no person in power can manipulate the system for their own benefit. If this could happen to me, someone with resources and a platform, then what does that say for those who don't have a voice?" The courtroom was silent, hanging on her every word. "I am not seeking revenge," she continued, her gaze locked on Graves. "But I am seeking justice, not just for myself, but for everyone who has been falsely accused, silenced, or ignored. The system only works if the truth matters." And today, the truth has prevailed. The judge nodded, his expression unreadable. Thank you, Miss Leavitt. We will reconvene shortly to discuss the next steps. As Karoline sat back down, she could feel the weight of history shifting in her favor. The truth had won, but the battle for justice was far from over. As the courtroom emptied, the echoes of the gavel still lingered in the air. Karoline Leavitt remained seated, her hands clasped together, absorbing everything that had transpired. Justice had been served, but the weight of the moment sat heavy on her shoulders. She had won, not just for herself, but for every individual who had ever been falsely accused, every voice that had been silenced, for those who had been powerless against the system. But victory did not erase the experience. It did not